Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. Back in the fields this morning. It's somewhat dull. It's Friday and some of you will be pleased that I'm back to the Summer Wells case today, having taken a short break and made some videos about other cases that I'm following. So before we get into Summer Wells, I just want to say that I'm very thankful and grateful that 15-year-old Maddie Thomas from Bristol in southwest England has been found. She's been found alive. She's now safe. And 3 men have been arrested for her abduction. She was found in a house with 3 men. Horrors against children, against people in general, happen everywhere, all over the world, even in rural East Tennessee, especially in rural East Tennessee, because that's the location of missing 5-year-old when she disappeared, now 6, Summer Wells. 2 days ago, I revisited a topic that I deep dived into in November on the day of the 5-month anniversary of Summer's disappearance. All about family ties in Beech Creek, about land rights, how people have lived on that land, their ancestors have owned that land, many acres of it, for generation after generation. How they don't like outsiders. Outsiders could possibly get shot if they so much as go down a certain road. That's the implication of what some people in that local area have said. Notwithstanding, the vast majority of people in rural East Tennessee or in Beech Creek are law-abiding, regular, salt-of-the-earth people who have absolutely no connection with the underworld, the drug world, the human trafficking world. It's only a small proportion of the people, like it's a small proportion of the people in Bristol, England, where Maddie Thomas was abducted from, are involved. There's groups of people, rings of people that are involved in this kind of thing who prey on vulnerable individuals. And then you get members within families, probably unknown to their relatives, who choose to rent out their children. I personally know 2 cases. Not spoken to either of these people for several years, but these are people just in my social circle, not people I've known professionally. One happened to live on a street I used to live on, next door but one to me, actually. And when he was 6, his mother used to rent him out to men, sometimes groups of men. We're going about 10 miles as the crow flies in a northerly direction there. City called Preston. Does that mean that everybody in the city of Preston is an abuser? No. But there is a drug problem there. There are drug rings there that the police are trying to crack. There are. Just like there are in other towns and cities. Bolton, over in that direction, has got a drug trafficking problem. Manchester, over in that direction. Big city, absolutely. Lots of problems, lots of families involved. Areas out there where the law is sometimes scared to tread. It happens everywhere. So when people say it doesn't happen in my backyard, it doesn't happen on my street, well, maybe it does, and you're just not aware of it. Another person from my social circle, again, not spoke to her for many years, but Preston, over in that direction, go beyond Preston, out towards Lancaster, and this was very rural property. I've been there. Very rural property. And this girl, initially abused by her stepfather for a long time while she was a girl, and he decided to make a little bit of extra money by renting her out to men that he would advertise. He would advertise for these men to come to this very rural, lovely, lovely property. Did the neighbours know about it? Nah, probably not. Another case that I've been covering on this channel over the last couple of days is the murder of Kylen Schulte and Crystal Beck Turner. And now the Grand County Sheriff's Office there in Moab, Utah, have named a suspect, Adam Pinkowitz. And I showed some clips in a video yesterday from Court TV and Jean-Paul Schulte, Kylen's dad, talking through the events. And Jean-Paul had set up a clue booth. People brought tips to him. People who perhaps are a bit nervous about talking to the cops for whatever reason. And tips came in. One of them was Adam Pinkowitz, quietly working behind the scenes. Just like law enforcement have been quietly working behind the scenes. And Vinnie rightly said, if you see something, say something. But in Summer Wells' case, as I discussed a couple of days ago, in places like rural East Tennessee, where there are certain members within criminally minded families who are dangerous, that people are scared of, people who will shoot you if you get on the wrong side of them. Fred Hill, who lives on Ben Hill Road, just a bit further into the hollow than the Wells, he shot a guy in the throat in 2016. Allegedly, it has been said that casings were kicked into the creek by the locals. Not like clearing up evidence. I don't know why you'd do that, other than clearing up evidence. The threat that somebody could get shot, an outsider coming in, taking photographs or driving perfectly lawfully down the public roads, is going to get shot for venturing onto certain roads, is perhaps not so much an idle threat, not at all. And the locals who do know something, who know these families, who aren't blind to what goes on in the criminal underworld, but who themselves live a lawful life, they just know about it, are scared to say something. They're not going to go to law enforcement. They know better. Certainly not going to tell a YouTuber. They know far better than that. So it's interesting when we think about the people who have been prepared to speak out in Summer's case. And I'm talking here about people who are incredibly close to Ben Hill Road, who have lived or live on Ben Hill Road. One of them is a neighbour. Another one is Fred Hill. I think a lot of what Fred said when he spoke to Ziggy were lies, deliberate lies. But I am going to revisit Fred's interview in light of recent events, shall we say. Fred said that the Wells had a pool, and the other neighbour, who said, Fred is just Fred, said they don't have a pool. Well, they do have a pool, or at least they did have a pool. Here's a picture of it in exactly the same place that Fred said it was. Now, it begs the question, how does Fred know there was a pool? Well, perhaps because he visited that property. You see, Don would have you believe, but back in the early days, he'd have you believe that he hardly knew his neighbours. The neighbours would have you believe that they hardly knew Don and Candice. But you don't have to listen very hard to know that they do know Don and Candice. They do. Don Scherfy Sr. told Prayer Garden of America that he'd been on that property lots of times. He talked about that property. Fred Hill. We know that Don and Fred associated with each other. Is it part of just their drug habit? Yeah, probably. But how would Fred know that a certain neighbour's son was in a pool with Summer unless he was there. Now that's not a problem, is it? A kid in a pool, perhaps being supervised by the adult son of your neighbour who you know very well, not a problem, is it? Not a crime, is it? No. The fact that Fred was there, possibly, probably, and he saw that, not a crime, is it? No, of course not. But we have to put a context around it. It's interesting that the people who spoke out the most, certain people who spoke out the most, are the most upset when their testimony is brought into question. We know that the ex-partner of certain neighbours has drug connections. We know that, according to that neighbour, said neighbour's ex-partner was there on the Wells property the night before Summer got gone. Now, in my video the other day, 2 days ago, I said that Don and Candice are outsiders. They're not native Tennesseans. Candice is from Wisconsin and Don is from Utah. That's where his family resides. Certainly his mother, Karen, her family, strong members of the LDS Church, are from Utah in recent generations. But Don himself has moved around a lot. He stated in one interview that he was born in Florida, but he's also lived in Texas, California, Arkansas. We've also heard from Don that he used to travel about with his dad when he was very young. He used to help his dad. So Don knows the United States. He knows the highways and byways of the United States. And it's fortuitous for Don that his mother's third husband owned 11 acres of property in rural East Tennessee. And when he died in 2007, this guy being William Goad, 110 Ben Hill Road passed on to Karen, Don's mother. And then eventually, after her death, it was passed on to Don, eventually. He's not native, is he? So, you know, there's the argument that, well, if your kid goes missing and you're an outsider to that community, if those criminally minded members of that community know something, they're not going to help you, whether it's through fear or whether it's through allegiance, or whether it's because they themselves are involved. They're not going to confess, they're not going to say anything, they're not going to give that tip that they know into law enforcement. Because why would you put your neck on the block to defend, to help out outsiders? There's that way to look at it. But Don does know a lot of people around there. He's ingratiated himself into that community. He knows a lot of people. He has lots of connections. If he's involved with the criminally minded people in that local community through non-blood allegiance, he becomes one of them. There's always that chance that through his connections, through the people he knows, that he's denied knowing them well. Didn't know his neighbours before this, now realises his neighbours are wonderful people. Yeah, he said that back in the beginning. And as a side note, this is why I keep showing you interviews, things that were said from the very early days. Because as these 11 months have rolled by, that script, yes, it's adhered to, but additional people have added a lot of additional things. It's like certain aspects of it have been honed, have been changed to make it sound more believable. We have to revisit the possibility, as I did 2 days ago, in revisiting the video that I made in November on the family ties and land rights and things like that. We have to entertain the possibility that summer was trafficked. In those communities, those rural communities, it is very easy to traffic a child out of that area through the land that is known only, the trails on that land known only to people who are very local to that area. Where Sheriff Ronnie Lawson has told people to check their own properties, which is standard in a missing persons case. They do, law enforcement's everywhere say to the public, please check your own property, you know it better than we do, please check. But what if those people, some of those people, were involved in someone's disappearance? What if people are aware of who might be involved and who don't check, who don't go onto someone else's property to check? Law enforcement who have been misdirected in certain ways, maybe have been told things have been checked and they actually haven't. There's all sorts of possibilities, isn't there? And these are only possibilities, aren't they? This leads me on to Chris McDonough's show, The Interview Room, from last night. And Josh from the lab was on there, and Mary, Don's stepsister, was on there. Fantastic play from Mary there. Really getting Don on side, getting him to talk about certain things. And this was a collaborative effort between Chris and Mary. And it was at the time, this was in August, it was the time when Don absolutely hated Chris McDonough. But what essentially him and Mary did was play good cop, bad cop. So Chris was bad cop, Mary was good cop. Don could confide in Mary. Now, did he say anything at all that was relevant to the disappearance of Summer directly? No, he didn't. Mary did press him, and he remained very quiet. He was, talking in his kind of meek voice, that make you feel sorry for him voice, that he does when he's sober. Very different Don than when he isn't sober or when he's angry. That Don becomes abusive, verbally aggressive. Not a nice person at all. But Don with the feel sorry for me voice, he's actually very believable. But he said some things. He said some things to Mary in that call. And I'm going to play you a clip here. Chris played it a few times. Link to this in the description box. It is absolutely worth the watch. Listen to this.
I remember many times throughout my life, girls hitting on me. I've been to places in California where I've been to some places where there were little kids, where people were trying to sell these little kids.
Oh, wow.
I've seen a lot of shit.
That doesn't surprise me. Not at all. Does not surprise me whatsoever, because he said that before. Wasn't it on a call with, I think it would have been Ziggy? He found a girl, a young girl, and he said to her, what are you doing here? And he took her back to the place where she was staying. So he did a bit of white knighting, that he rescued this girl from this horrible situation. But what was Don doing there in the first place? In Don saying that, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's involved in selling children. He gives himself away. He's given himself away one too many times, because he talks about the drug underworld. He's talked about running drugs from Mexico. He's talked about that. Does it mean that he trafficked Summer, sold Summer? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But he knows that world. He's involved in that world. When he said that, that hilarious story that he told, where he'd been questioned by the cops who believed that he'd sold Summer for drugs. And he proved that he didn't need the money from the sale of his daughter, because he bought $2,000, was it $2,000, of crack, and he gave it away free in Knoxville. Now, I don't believe he gave it away free. I believe this is a story he's concocted because law enforcement were on his tail. They were tailing him because they know he knows that world. Now, Detective John Pruitt has told us that they don't believe that there's any evidence whatsoever that Summer was abducted or trafficked out of the area. And I said 2 days ago, well, that could well be true. And I might have to leave a theory behind, because trafficking is still very much on my list of possible outcomes for Summer Wells. It absolutely is. Is it my only theory? By all means, no. Because the parents could have done something other than selling her, easily. Something could have happened to Summer when she wandered away. Or she could have been picked up by a local opportunist and killed by them. No trafficking involved. But we have to keep trafficking on the table. Even though Detective John Pruitt has said there's no evidence of her being trafficked out of the area. What if these traffickers are one step ahead? Or what if Detective John Pruitt has said that for a reason? They don't have to tell the truth. There might not be evidence for it, but they might still be investigating it. She might have been trafficked within the area. It's a bit of verbal sleight of hand. Because, when we know that Don Wells is very knowledgeable about that kind of world, that he's walked in that kind of world, according to him, he's run drugs in that world, and then team that with Candice absolutely freaking out in discussion with the behaviour panel. Where's she going? Tilly! Oh, person with a dog. Just a sec. Can you see him? But when you know that world and you have contacts all over the United States, it's not a stretch whatsoever. After you've heard Don speak, it's not a stretch at all to wonder whether Don is involved. And I don't mean Don being involved as in he's the one that sold Summer, while I believe that is still on the table. How about if what Don has intimated has some truth to it? That this thing is far bigger than anybody knows. And he's scared. And Candice is scared. Because on Dr. Phil, the behaviour panel, when at the mere mention of the Cornbread Mafia, she freaked out and left. Now, the Cornbread Mafia is just one example of organised crime gangs. It's just one that was known to Greg and Scott. I don't think the Cornbread Mafia took Summer, but what I mean is Candice was scared of the mention of organised crime. And at times, Don looked scared. At times, I do believe Don. At times. But he said so much that you think, you have got to be looked at. You have got to be number one suspect. But are they the only suspects? No, because we haven't heard any updates from Sheriff Ronnie Lawson. He's under no obligation to give us any updates about who they've cleared. Certain people have come forward and said that the cops have cleared them, but do we know that they're telling the truth? No. I think Don's deflections and lies, and this person's involved, and that person's involved, and the next person's involved, we've thought it's to deflect away from himself. But is it though? I mean, yeah, absolutely, Don could be involved. But he could be the person who's too scared to say something. Candice could be the person who's too scared to say something because they know who took Summer, but they're too scared to say something. We have to talk about that. We have to consider that. Given the circles that Don has been involved in, could it be true that he bit off more than he could chew? And Summer paid the ultimate price. It is possible, absolutely. And that's why, in a couple of days' time, it's going to be 11 months since Summer got gone. And this is why we are no closer to knowing what happened to Summer than we were on day one. And that's why I keep going back to those very early days. It's important because everything else from then is hearsay, is speculation, is theory. We know a lot, but what do we know as fact? Very, very, very little. So over the last 11 months, I've sat, I've observed quietly, and I've clocked everything. And I'm happy to sit here and play the long game because the reactions of people, very, very, very interesting. But I'm going to leave it there for today. It's goodbye from Miss Tillington, who can go off the lead now, I think, and Miss Cassie Springer. Bye, guys. You can move, just don't run off. Come on. Come on, good girl.